Hello, and welcome to our first episode of Parallel Summit 2021. I'm Perry Boring, the founder and president of the Chamber of Digital Commerce and the host of Parallel. We are thrilled to be back for our second season. Gosh, we have had just such an incredible start to the year and an even bigger week in the crypto and the blockchain industry. Just in the past few days, Coinbase has gone public. SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce reintroduced her safe harbor for digital tokens, and Gary Gensler has been confirmed as the chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission. There's a lot of exciting developments underway, but throughout today's event, we want to focus on the bigger picture. What is the role blockchain technology is going to play in the global financial system, and what's at stake for the United States if we fail to recognize this and act smartly and strategically as a nation? One of our founding fathers, Ben Franklin, said it like this: when you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And right now, the United States is not planning for the biggest digital transformation that will occur in our lifetime. And we are at a key moment of financial history. There is a tectonic shift underway. And if we don't start planning and taking action soon, we have everything to risk as the world's leading economy. The United States needs a national plan of action for blockchain technology and digital assets. This needs to be a top national priority, if not the number one priority. And we need to move more quickly to create and implement it. There is a new space race that is currently underway. It's the cyberspace race of building and controlling the systems and governance that will power the digital economy. Other nations like China, Australia, the European Union, and countries large and small are well ahead of us in this race. And frankly, I don't think the US is even on the playing field. Let me explain. In the fall of 2019, the president of the People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping, addressed China's most powerful body on blockchain technology. And he said, quote, "It is necessary to strive to let China take the leading position in the emerging field of blockchain, occupy the commanding heights of innovation, and gain new industrial advantages." President Xi Jinping's talk has been described as a Sputnik moment. China has made developing digital currency and blockchain technology one of its highest priorities. What are we doing about this? Do we even understand the significance of the risk this could pose to our economic security? Let me explain further. For the past 7 years, the People's Bank of China has been building DCEP. That stands for Digital Currency Electronic Payment, also known as the digital yuan. This project, it's basically complete and it's going into implementation. Why are they building it? And what purpose will it serve? Well, China hasn't been shy about that. They've made multiple public statements from very high Chinese officials at international meetings with our allies in attendance. And they've said that the strategy behind this project is to undercut the dominance of the US dollar system and to circumvent other US influenced systems like SWIFT. They're not even hiding their intentions. What exactly are we doing about this? What's our plan as China exports the digital yuan around the world through their Belt and Road Initiative and even to the US? Because there's US companies like Starbucks and McDonald's that are reportedly already accepting the digital yuan in their early trials. Many analysts have said this is a threat to the US dollar dominance. Do we fully understand the implications that could have for the people of the United States? While we do have some bold and visionary leaders throughout the federal government and Congress, some of them are here with us today, we have leaders in the states, there is still a significant lack of awareness and urgency to seize the opportunity to lead in digital finance. One of today's guests, Michael Casey, wrote in a recent op-ed, US dominance of the global financial system is the unique international gatekeeping powers that come with that. They've been in place for so long that most people, both in government and in business, take it for granted as a given. At the Chamber of Digital Commerce, we recently sent a letter to President Biden and Vice President Harris calling for a national action plan for blockchain, and we are reiterating that here today. We are calling on the Biden and Harris administration to, one, develop a clear strategy and a roadmap for how we are going to lead in this race. Take ownership of that strategy, embrace it, and spread it globally to our allies with clear messaging and decisive actions. Two, we must support our private sector. They are the economic engine and the pioneers of this technology ecosystem. We should be working with them and encouraging their innovation and experimentation. Three, builds on point number two, prevent regulatory inconsistencies that create confusion and discourage compliance. Investors and innovators, they need clear rules to the road. And four, the US digital dollar must be architected carefully and in a way that promotes American values, especially the right to privacy. While the US led in the development of the internet, we will not lead in digital assets and blockchain technology if we don't have a robust plan and start executing on it. Digital money and financial systems are coming. The question is, will the US be a leader or a laggard? The American blockchain journey has to start now. Next, we'll be hearing from two very important voices from Capitol Hill, the co-chairs of the Congressional Blockchain Caucus, U.S. Representative Tom Emmer and Darren Soto. This conversation is moderated by Matthew Comstock of Murphy and McGonigal. Let's go to the panel.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Perry Ann. Welcome to our fireside chat. I'm Matt Comstock. I'm a shareholder in the DC office of Murphy McGonigal, and I'm the co-chair of our firm's blockchain practice group. I am honored to moderate a conversation today with the co-chairs of the Congressional Blockchain Caucus, Representative Tom Emmer from Minnesota and Representative Darren Soto from Florida. I will let each one of them introduce themselves, and I'll start with you, Congressman Emmer.
Got it, guys. I think I got it.
Yep.
All right.
We can hear you, sir.
Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate it. Darren, great to see you. I look forward to when we can do this in person. I'm Tom Emmer. I'm from the great state of Minnesota, and I've been part of these types of get-togethers in the past. I just think I'm looking forward to this discussion today. Perry Ann, thank you for teeing it up. This is all about making sure that we can keep the best and the brightest here at home, that we can continue to develop new technologies that are going to benefit not just Americans, but everybody around the world. And that we don't have not only a brain drain by having our entrepreneurs flee to areas where they can actually explore and test without risk of an enforcement action after the fact, or an IRS that recharacterizes their earnings after the fact. It's really important that we raise awareness, and I think Darren and I, that's the job of the Blockchain Caucus, is to raise awareness with our colleagues on the Hill, so that people, and he's your mission, Darren, but people like Brad Spencer quit referring to cryptocurrency and this type of discussion we're going to have is a haven for just criminals and tax cheats. Now, this is where the entrepreneurs are, and I know Darren and I face this with all kinds of members that just don't understand this new technology. So, Matt, so happy to be part of this discussion with Darren today, and I just appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Congressman Soto.
Thanks so much for the opportunity here today, and it's great to work with my dear friend Tom Emmer, my co-chair for the Blockchain Caucus. We have a scrappy bipartisan group of us including Foster and Warren Davidson and Gottheimer and Ted Budd and others, because we recognize we have challenges, right? We're innovative leaders, but we have regulatory uncertainty. I represent the Central Florida area. Many of you know us from tourism or from agriculture. We also have a huge tech industry, predominantly in commercial space and the busiest spaceport in the world, and aerospace, simulation and training, biotech, nanotechnology, and computer programming. We know we need the clarity in everything from establishing jurisdiction and definitions for cryptocurrency. It could be a currency, it could be a future, it could be a commodity. On very minimal cases, it'll be a security, but that seems to be an area of tension right now. And we know that this is hurting cryptocurrency firms in the United States, as to this day, we're seeing half a cost go to legal. That's not a way to promote innovation. And we already are educating our constituents and fellow members that cryptocurrency is a fixed ledger. So it'd be a terrible way to commit crimes when you'd have a permanent evidence of the transaction. This is the way forward to protect us from cybersecurity threats and to promote international services transactions, remittances, and a lot of other really exciting ways that cryptocurrency will make doing business more efficient.
Thank you, Congressman. I'd like to build on what you were just saying. I'd like to hear from both of you on the US and how it compares to other countries in terms of blockchain competitiveness. And Congressman Soto, if you could maybe talk a bit about sort of the use of a blockchain technology in commerce and adoption.
Sure. We have the Digital Taxonomy and Token Taxonomy Acts that all of the blockchain members have co-introduced. Warren Davidson has one of them, and I have the other. He's in financial services. I'm in energy and commerce. And it finally creates a new asset called a digital asset, because the 1920s, 1930s definitions of financial assets don't work right now. And it's causing firms to be uncertain about where they stand and which agencies have jurisdiction over what they do. And so it would establish clear definitions for a digital asset. It would establish clear jurisdiction and also look for ways that we could promote competitiveness while protecting consumers. We did see some success last term. At the very end, we passed out portions of the Digital Taxonomy Act and also the Blockchain Innovation Act, because everything takes way too long in Washington. It's in the form of studies by the FTC and the Department of Commerce to get at these two issues of regulatory certainty, competitiveness, and protecting consumers, with the goal being that they would come back with those findings over about a year so that our peers can finally be at where all of us in the blockchain caucus are, which is to put pen to paper and establish this regulatory certainty.
Thank you. Congressman Emmer, could you talk a little bit about building on what Congressman Soto said about financial regulation around blockchain?
You bet. I think what I'd like to do, though, is be just a little bit more broad. I think Darren hit on some really important things when it comes to trying to educate our members. The fact that when we're dealing with these new ways of thinking, you've got to have definitions for what is a currency, what is a commodity, what is a security, and what is the regulatory framework that applies to each one. Look, Matt, I think we've got to recognize that we're behind when compared to other places in the world. Other countries have already embraced these technologies, and it seems like some of us are afraid to do that here in this country. And some of that has come from actually the executive branch, the bureaucracies that we're dealing with. Some of it comes from our membership, as we were talking about. That's the purpose of the blockchain caucus, is to try and get members more in tune with what's going on. The reticence to accept these new technologies as a positive really has some implications for businesses, the financial markets themselves. And I think Darren touched on this in his opening remarks, our national security. the Fed and the Treasury don't seem to be in a rush to develop a central bank digital currency, which I think Perry Ann was talking about before we got started. And it's something that we should be very acutely aware of, since China is moving ahead very quickly with this. If we're going to continue to be the world's reserve currency, we need to have an answer for that. And obviously an answer that protects privacy of Americans. When I was talking in my opening remarks, Matt, I was talking specifically about a entity like the SEC that actually is regulating through enforcement actions. By not having a clear regulatory framework that innovators can comply with, that they can understand and comply with. This is, I think, Darren's reference to the lawyers are making all the money because they're trying to figure out how to do this. I'll give you another example. Canada has 2 Bitcoin ETFs. The United States hasn't even approved one yet. There was not a clear tax regime for virtual currencies until the latter part of 2019. And I think Darren and I would both agree that regime needs work. And then in terms of money transmission, it is an entirely overburdensome process that deters entrepreneurs and small businesses from innovating in the blockchain space when you have to go through and register in 50 different states. I guess I'd conclude by saying we risk falling behind in all of these areas and more if we don't start to get some regulatory certainty and some clarity on this, which, by the way, it goes back to my initial point. It tells investors, entrepreneurs, and innovators that maybe the United States isn't the best place to innovate anymore. And as policymakers, we are not going to let that happen.
So Congressman, let's build on that a little bit. What is it that Congress can and should be doing? I think Congressman Soto mentioned the Token Taxonomy Act. Are there other efforts underway in Congress right now?
Yeah, there are. And great questions. The reason we're having this discussion, I hope we need to enact the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act. The Financial Action Task Force has proposed a rule change that would be incredibly dangerous to innovation in the United States and blockchain developers and service providers that never take custody of consumer funds. Because this new rule would propose that they would have to register. This would be those that are non-custodial entities would still have to register as money transmitters. And I think first and foremost, it's the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act, which would allow us to have a federal uniformity to those state laws. Token developers also need a clear framework for determining if their asset is a security or not, which is what Darren was talking about. I think the Securities Clarity Act provides regulatory clarity by amending the securities law to make it clear that a digital token is separate and distinct from a securities offering it may have been part of at the beginning. This way, entrepreneurs can innovate without the fear of the SEC enforcement action down the road. A couple others. I think there also needs to be greater clarity in the tax law, which I was talking about. The regime still needs work. This is so individuals that they can engage with the technologies knowing there are clear guidelines for how they're going to file taxes. I've got a bill called the Safe Harbor for Taxpayers with Forked Assets Act, which would provide a safe harbor for taxpayers with forked digital assets, in which the IRS cannot impose any penalties or fees against individuals that attempt to report these assets until the IRS actually provides sufficient guidance on how to do so. That way you don't get surprised, Matt, after the fact. You go and you innovate, you've done everything according to the rules as far as you understand them, only to have the IRS show up and say, oh no, this is a taxable event. This would allow a safe harbor for that, so they don't have to worry about that. And then it would only be prospective if the IRS changed its determination of the taxable event. Look, taxpayers, I think it's pretty obvious, can only comply when the law is clear. And why don't I stop there? I'm sure Darren's got some other ones as well.
Congressman Soto had to step away for a minute. So we'll have to proceed without him for the moment.
All right.
One of the things that you mentioned, Congressman, was some of the bureaucracy that you see in the in the executive branch and somewhat in the legislative branch. What challenges have you found in dealing with your own colleagues in Congress with respect to blockchain technology?
The biggest challenge is the lack of understanding for how these technologies work. It's that simple. In their good faith effort to draft policy or to support rulemaking, that whether it's the bureaucracy or my colleagues that they think protects consumers, the policy and the rulemaking that's been done has actually hurt consumers, and it's threatening innovation, further innovation. The departments, the agencies, and I would add, I guess, international bodies also have put out harmful guidance, like FinCEN's self-hosted wallets rule, or the FATF's, I think, for lack of a better statement, that's how you say that, their proposed rule that would include virtual asset companies that provide a financial service but don't have control over customer funds, which I referred to earlier, the non-custodial money transmitters. That's what they would call them. I think these are very dangerous to innovation, and I do think it comes from the fact that they don't have an understanding of how the technologies work in the first place. If more members of Congress, and quite frankly, those in the executive branch agencies and perhaps even internationally, understood these technologies, I think we'd be able to push back against these regressive initiatives more effectively. But that doesn't mean we're not. We just have to continue to raise awareness. And as the people who are listening to this fireside chat, I think that's what we're calling it, as they know, some of my colleagues in Congress fault crypto all the time, thinking it's simply a great tool to be used to commit financial crimes. Well, that can't be farther from the truth. In fact, there's a new Crypto Council for Innovation that's out. You might have heard of them, Matt. Square, Coinbase, Fidelity, and Paradigm are sponsoring this. They've got a report that's out recently that says the criminals are actually moving away from Bitcoin. You heard Darren talk about why. I think the U.S. dollar, it is still, cash is king when it comes to being used for financial crimes more than cryptocurrencies. And I hope that some of my colleagues in Congress can come to realize this and focus on the promises that cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology can offer to our society. And that's our goal at the Blockchain Caucus.
Thank you, Congressman. So, given everything, all of the issues you've just identified, what are some priorities for the upcoming year, in Congress or otherwise?
Well, crypto and blockchain are in the news every single day. Obviously, people are paying attention to these emerging technologies, and they're interested in a way that, they weren't a year or two ago. With the caucus, and I hope, good, Darren's back. I think Darren will confirm with the caucus, we're going to hold member and staff level briefings on timely issues. Those that are curious to learn more about what they're reading in the news, whether it's about NFTs or how blockchain can be used to achieve settlements and trading, they're going to need a place to go and learn right now. And I think that's what the Blockchain Caucus can focus on. I think we're also going to focus on, make it clear that we're focusing on blockchain and crypto, at least from my perspective. I don't know if Darren agrees with that, but we want the caucus to be a place where members and staff can learn these things on a deeper level, because a deeper understanding really is going to be important for Congress to develop good policy in this space. And look, I think the reason Darren and I are involved, and I'll let him speak for himself, I think we realized early on that bad policy when it comes to blockchain and crypto and everything that's related to it, these technologies, it could sour these technologies and hinder the growth, which I think would be harmful for our future.
Sure, and I certainly concur about bringing more members and staff in to familiarize themselves. We also been working on this in several committees, particularly financial services, particularly in energy and commerce. Last term, we as a caucus put out letters for everything from utilizing blockchain to help with the distribution of personal protective equipment and vaccines to considering the use of cryptocurrency for stimulus checks. So those were things we pushed. The last administration and this administration may not be there yet, but we're going to keep pushing to get there. There have been some other major victories, though, that have happened, and most of them have been through the appropriations process. We were able to get IRS tax guidance on de minimis transactions into the 2021 appropriations package. We were able to get some guidance to the SEC and FTC on protection from fraudulent marketing of crypto projects. In energy and blockchain, we required the DOE, the Department of Energy, to coordinate research on the need for new blockchain solutions that support grid modernization. With the FDA, where we have them utilizing a blockchain for food traceability, and we're able to allocate $4 million for that. We set out for OPM, Office of Personal Management, and the Veterans Administration to consider using blockchain to organize their IT in the case of OPM and more efficiently organize dates and decrease wait times for our veterans. And where we're going with this eventually, in addition to the two key pieces of legislation to establish the definitions and jurisdiction, is for a blockchain center of excellence, potentially in commerce, that would help spearhead government-wide initiatives in blockchain. And finally, we got into the House NDAA, but we were kicked out by the Senate, and that's where Republicans and Democrats in the House can always rally around our other competitors, the senators. We got in technology that would require a qualitative military edge for the use of blockchain technology for the military, but that got bumped out in the in conference. But the fact that it passed the House shows that and this of course is critical for communications between our troops. I'm not going to go too into it, but that and blocking against cyber attacks, which we know we're under constant threat of. So there have been victories. There have been things we've worked on, mostly flying below the radar in appropriations, but we need to get the big prize done, which is the statutes and jurisdiction and definitions to create that certainty to really let blockchain and cryptocurrency flow and improve in the United States.
Thank you for that. If you don't mind, I'd like to, we've gotten a couple of questions from the audience, and there's, excuse me, a theme or an issue that I think a lot of people keep coming back to, and both of you have mentioned as well, and that's the digital dollar. As you both know, there are stable coins as well, and stable coins are growing in popularity, for payment purposes. Do you see any tension between the use of stable coins and a digital dollar? Does one make sense in certain circumstances but not in the others? I would appreciate your thoughts on stable coins versus the digital dollar.
Well, I would first say I think there's room for all these different options. We already have digital currency under the US dollar. How many people use a paper dollar any day of the week? We utilize just old technology to have that digital currency of our bank accounts and our debit cards. Cryptocurrency is about making it more secure going forward with a better technology. We have different ways. We have transactions, everything from trading real estate and stocks and bonds to cryptocurrency to any other number of trades that may be of value in our economy. So I view there to be room for a lot of these different things, but I don't think government should try to overreach and take over this very innovative space. I think that's something that we would look to down the line as cryptocurrency matures and is a place where we could have that space for that. But this is not something we're pushing right now, but it's something that, along with other areas of government utilizing blockchain technology, that I personally am open-minded to, but we're not there yet. We need to give more ability for the private sector to develop this nascent but growing industry.
I think the greatest thing you just heard from Darren Soto is this is the place, and this is just coming from a Republican on the other side of the aisle, that there aren't sides of the aisle on this issue. There are only people who are actually willing to dive into it and learn it, or they're already working in it. And there are people that are afraid to death of it because it's not the world that they understood before they came to Congress. And those are the people that we have to educate. I think, like Darren says, I don't care if it's stable coins, non-fungible tokens, which I mentioned earlier. All kinds of different things are going to be created in this space and should be. And I love it because it's not about being a Republican or a Democrat. You see Darren Soto and Tom Emmer sitting in front of you that probably represent on certain policies two completely different opposite ends of the earth, I would guess. Guess what? We take all that off and we agree when it comes to too much government in this space at this time is not a good thing. Does that mean that we think that there should be the Wild West and there should be absolutely no government? Absolutely not. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons we have the blockchain caucus, because we got to find that balance. And we've got to make sure that people aren't learning the rules of the road because some government agency decides that they don't like what they did. We've got to give people the incentive, and we've got to give them the environment to continue to grow. When it comes to this digital dollar, which started this question, look, I think Darren's going to be a lot like me, even though maybe we differ a little bit on the fact that I do think the U.S. has to figure out whether it's the way we transact business now, Darren, or if it's with a quote unquote digital dollar issued by the Treasury, how we maintain our status as the reserve currency in the world based on what China's doing, how we remain competitive and how we can continue to lead. That being said, I think the place where, once again, our party labels, whatever you want to call it, disappear. Whatever they put out, we want to make sure that those privacy considerations are paramount. I don't think we want what they have in China, which is they can monitor every movement, everything that their citizens are doing. That's not what I think either one of us would advocate for, or the other members of the blockchain caucus. So I think that's probably going to be the bigger issue as we go forward. Jay Powell said recently, we're not in a hurry. We just want to make sure it's done right. Well, I think the privacy issue, maintaining those privacy issues are going to be a primary concern for everyone at the Treasury, in the different agencies. But I'll guarantee you, for your elected officials, Republican and Democrat, that's going to be one of the primary issues.
Thank you. So we are running out of time. So Congressman Soto, Congressman Emmer, I'd like to give you, a minute to make a closing statement. And Congressman Soto, I'll begin with you.
Thanks so much. Tom had mentioned about China and their aggressiveness in this area, and I think that's one of the main reasons we need to continue down this road. This is a battle for the free world. Economic rivals like China don't share our values of democracy, of equal rights. And if they end up dominating the world global financial system, it's going to be a very different world than we live in right now, which is one of the main driving reasons, along with fostering innovation here in the United States, which means higher paying jobs, that this is so important. This is about continuing our shared values of democracy, of equality across the free world. And areas like Europe, areas like Eastern Asia, where they have some democracies like a Japan or Korea or others, Australia, they're looking to us to help lead the free Western democratic world in various different spaces. And in the financial services area, this is one of the biggest ones that we need to continue to move forward on.
Yeah, I would say this is I'd echo what Darren just said, and I'd say this is a huge moment in our world's history. This is where we're going to take a huge leap forward. And the question is it going to happen in the United States of America? The interesting thing for people like me, I look at this and say, we have large concentrations of our population in big cities because that's where access to services occurs. This next age, the technology age of which blockchain and crypto and everything related to it are such a big part, this has the opportunity to decentralize all of that. But more importantly, it has the potential to put us as the individual in charge of our own destiny. It puts people in the financial system that never had an opportunity before. It can create new opportunities for everyone, not just those with the ability to negotiate with our financial systems, but those that are our financial services industry, but those that haven't in the past. I think we have to look at what happened with the internet. Government got out of the way and the internet became what it is. We need to look at this much the same way. We need to take a light touch approach when it comes to this, but we also have to recognize it's time to get our colleagues in Congress up to speed before we miss this next great opportunity. And I think we're well into it. Now we got to make sure that we allow it to foster and grow, and we've got to make sure government agencies not only create an environment conducive for that innovation and growth, but that Darren and I, through the caucus and our fellow members in Congress, both on the House side, where there seems to be a little bit more creativity, Darren, as opposed to the little older population on the other side of the building. But both sides, we've got to get these guys up to speed so that they recognize the opportunity that exists, not just for Americans in our future, but frankly for the entire world. And we should be leading in that. Really appreciate you doing this, John.
Well, thank you very much. I very much appreciate both of you taking the time to speak with us today. This has been a great discussion about important blockchain issues that face our country. And thanks to the audience for joining in as well. Have a good day.
Thanks, guys.
Welcome back. The fight for crypto dominance. China is investing heavily in cryptocurrency and blockchain technology, while the U.S. is risking lagging behind the curve. Joining me right now is the Chamber of Digital Commerce President, Perian Boring. Perian, it's great to have you this morning. This is a really important subject because I know that the Chinese Communist Party is trying to outdo America, trying to get a leg up on things like artificial intelligence and cloud computing and semiconductors and now digital currency. What can you tell us about what the CCP is doing, why it's important for the United States to keep up in this space?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The Communist Party of China has made it one of their nation's highest priorities to dominate blockchain technology. And to quote President Xi Jinping, they're using blockchain to gain new industrial advantages. Well, what does this translate into? Let me give you an example. One part of China's blockchain strategy is to build a faster and more efficient payment system. And it's our understanding that the digital yuan is going to be interoperable with public blockchains like Bitcoin. And Maria, as I've shared on your show before, Bitcoin is replacing gold as the monetary layer of the financial system. And there's going to be transaction layers that sit on top of the Bitcoin network. And China is in the process of deploying their digital currency to become that transaction layer. I cannot stress enough how much is at stake for the US right now. The PBOC has filed hundreds of patents on their digital currency project. We've studied them at the Chamber of Digital Commerce. They will know all of our activity. They will know all of our spending habits. They will have the ability to surveil at levels never seen before in human history. You do not want the Chinese to have dominance in blockchain technology.
I could not agree more. That's why I was so happy to hear what you had to say about this, because this is a story that we are going to keep on. I know you sent a letter to the Biden administration urging the administration to work toward making America a leader in this technology. What are the key points that you made? Have you heard anything back? And walk us through what the United States needs to do to ensure that the CCP does not beat us at blockchain.
Look, China is years ahead of the U.S. in the cyber space race of building and controlling the systems and the governance that will power the digital economy. This is a call to action. We are calling on the Biden and the Harris administration to make blockchain a national priority and to establish a national action plan for blockchain to ensure our technical preeminence globally. There's some very simple things the US can do to achieve this. One, we need to have strong statements of support from our political leaders that we do see blockchain as critical digital infrastructure, and we want to lead in this space. And the second key to this is empowering our private sector. The private sector is the economic engine of the United States. We need to give businesses the regulatory clarity to operate in the US.
Yeah, we got to jump, but real quick, you think Miami is going to be a major cryptocurrency hub, is that right?
Look, Miami has a political champion in their mayor. He has this incredible vision to make Miami a hub for innovation. Due to his leadership, the city is considering a number of proposals, everything from integrating blockchain into the city's operations, including paying city workers in Bitcoin, to investing part of the city's treasury in Bitcoin. And as a result of this, Miami is attracting billions of dollars in commitments from investors globally, most notably from the IBC Group of Dubai.
Yeah, and with that comes the talent to do that. That's why the job creation is also going to be real important in Miami. Perian, we'll keep on it and we'll keep watching this. Very important story. Thanks very much for being here to discuss it. Perian Boring joining us there on Bitcoin.
Like Maria Bartiromo gets it, Congressman Tom Emmer gets it, Congressman Darren Soto gets it. I thought Darren Soto said it really well. He said, this is a battle for the free world. And Congressman Emmer said, this is a huge moment in our world's history. And what is our place going to be, again, in this shift in digital systems? One of the things that was really interesting about the conversation with Congressman Emmer and Congressman Soto is that they're leading the blockchain caucus, and they've pulled together this bipartisan group of members of Congress to promote policies that support the growth of blockchain technology in the US. And then they talked about that a little bit more, where they said, look, there aren't sides of the aisle on this issue. And that's so rare today, especially in this very divisive political world that we're operating in the United States. They said there's two types of people. There's those who have dug in and gotten educated and they understand it, and there's those who have not. And we've made a lot of progress and leveling up the level of knowledge and education throughout Congress and throughout the federal government, but there's still a lot of work to do. And again, the big thing that we're calling on is we've got to make decisive action. We've got to start moving because we have a lot to lose. So next we want to turn to another side of the conversation. And we've talked a little bit about, we've hinted on, we have to support our private sector. We need clear rules to the road. We need to give innovators and investors regulatory clarity. So next we want to hear from some of our leading companies in the private sector, those who are the pioneers in building out this ecosystem, so they can share their lessons from being on the front lines. How important is this technology really going to be? How are new decentralized technologies really transforming financial institutions and the markets? And ultimately, what's at stake if we don't move quickly? So here to moderate this conversation is Rumi Morales. She's a partner at Outlier Ventures. She's also one of our advisory board members at the Chamber. Over to the panel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's my pleasure to moderate Lessons from Industry Pioneers. Part of me feels like we should be wheeled out in wheelchairs or something, because you get kind of old in the crypto space, even though we've only been at this for 10 plus years or so. As Perry Ann mentioned, I'm proud to be an advisory board member of the Chamber of Digital Commerce, and I'm a partner at Outlier Ventures. I also began my journey in this space back in 2013-14 when I helped to launch and lead the venture arm of the CME Group. And it's my huge pleasure to welcome to the panel Patrick Campos, who is with Securrency, and Jason Chapala from Stellar Development Foundation. Patrick, if you'd like to give a brief background of yourself and Securrency, and then Jason, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure, thanks, Rumi. It's great to be here with you and with Jason. Securrency is basically a financial services infrastructure company, really focused on tying in blockchain with legacy systems and creating an infrastructure that supports all of these new technologies and all the new developments, with a particular focus on really what we call optimizing financial logistics. And that starts with really dealing with compliance issues, streamlining multi-jurisdictional compliance to really reduce costs. But there's a lot more to it. It's a very comprehensive system, and we're really pleased to work with all of the great minds in this space, including our friends over at Stellar. So hopefully that's a good segue over to you, Jason.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Chapala. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Stellar Development Foundation. So we are the people who created the Stellar blockchain network, which was one of the major public blockchains. And we at SDF view it as our mission to create equitable access to the global financial system. And we do that by shepherding the Stellar code base, talking to regulators and lawmakers, and also talking to private industry and helping them think through how they can build on Stellar and use it to accomplish their goals.
Thank you so much, the both of you. So as we dive in, I think for many people, when they think about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, only know of it as something that's perhaps traded on an exchange somewhere or virtual money, but are kind of missing out on what the actual critical use cases are in our economy going forward. So I don't know, Patrick, perhaps if you'd like to start, or Jason, actually, since we did Patrick last time, let's start with Jason. What exactly is the critical role that digital assets and blockchain are going to play in the economy for decades out, right? Not how it's traded today, but how will we be using this in the years to come?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think there are a lot of uses, but what we're really focused on, as I said, we care deeply about financial inclusion. It's actually sort of why Stellar was created in the first place. So in our view, we see digital assets as this really interesting, almost intermediary in between really heavyweight, full banking and really lightweight physical cash. Digital assets have the potential to help with the underbanked and the unbanked population because they give them the reach of a digital instrument. You can obviously, physical cash is limited by how far you can hand it to someone. Digitally, you don't have those restrictions, but it's also done in a model and in a format that is familiar to people. So we think digital assets are going to be incredibly important for helping bring more people into the financial system. And that can be through things like CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, but it's also through private stablecoins, because as other private entities issue these assets, they can then create things like wallets, which are much easier for individuals to interact with and to use. And again, they get that reach of a digital asset, but the simplicity of something that's a little more like a cash-like asset. So we view that financial inclusion piece as that's one of the ways digital assets are really going to change things going forward.
That's right. And I think it's always a very important point to stress for those who heard Congressman Emmer and Congressman Soto beforehand. And Congressman Emmer mentioned how when people think about crypto, too often it's always the negative use cases, when in reality, whether it's financial inclusion or some other areas, and Patrick, I'll toss it to you, of other ways that you think digital assets will help the economy. It's a very positive innovation. Patrick, do you have other thoughts on economic implications?
Yeah, of course. First of all, just agreeing with Jason. We're talking about, and certainly this was something that was discussed by, Congressman Emmer and Congressman Soto earlier. this idea of using the technology to bring people into the market that previously were excluded, and we can talk about all the reasons why that happens, but really what we're talking about is how do you sort of not so much just lift people up, but create opportunities where people can and again, I want to build on Congressman Emmer's point, really exist and act in the system as individuals. So this is really, really important. We actually came at this, and we're sort of quiet, not sort of one of the front facing organizations. We're an infrastructure company, and those who are in the industry know us, and those who aren't say, well, what do these guys do? But as you can see from the name Securrency, it's an amalgamation of securities and currency, and that's really because we see value as value. And that is that you shouldn't have to treat an investment asset differently than you treat a payment. And that's sort of an anomaly, a historical anomaly, and it has to do with a lot of factors. How do you price an asset, being one of them, but and that sort of directly leading to what value does the recipient place on the asset, and then of course whole systems, regulatory frameworks, and technology frameworks have built up around these sort of distinctions. That now what blockchain does and what blockchain technology does is it allows for the automation of business logic, the automation of compliance logic, so that these distinctions no longer become so critical. And so, of course, our name really implies, you can use an investment asset as a payment, and vice versa, right? So when you talk about stable coins, people talk about things like programmable money, and that has deep implications. But I'll pause there because we can go down a rabbit hole.
That's right. And actually, you were touching upon some key points that I wanted to dig in a little bit more. It's the transition from the traditional financial world to what we're seeing, and how that's going to actually occur in practice. I mentioned on my own when I was part of the CME, the first exchanges in the world, the first regulated exchanges were actually, the first one was in Japan in 1698. It was rice futures. And you would think of how people used to trade with open outcry using hand gestures for hundreds of years. And then in 20 years time, with the advent of electronic trading, that went away. But what took 20 years to displace is already being displaced, right, by digital trading. So as we go from traditional to electronic to digital, how are the financial infrastructure, how are our institutions changing? How is this being handled currently? I will talk, if it helps, Patrick. When we had the pre-call, you talked about the milk carton analogy, which I absolutely loved. If you want to share that with others.
Yeah, sure. Well, first I will say that the rice futures market. I mean, the hand gestures are a form of automation, right? So we were talking about sort of automating basic functions, even going back, right? So it's a great example of sort of how these things develop. I think what's happening here, and it's really interesting. And we look at sort of Coinbase's big day yesterday. And really the attention that's been sort of heaped on the Bitcoin and really the cryptocurrency market generally, and we view that certainly as very, very positive. But it's really funny, because when the institutions first look at something like this, they say, well, how can I take that really interesting development and put it into a traditional wrapper? Which, as we were talking about, is a little bit like pouring really good wine into a milk carton, right? So that's only the first step. Great, cryptocurrency is being recognized as a true investable asset. That's fantastic. We think that that's a great development, but it's really the starting point. It's what happens with the rest of the financial markets, and really that's been sort of our focus, is looking at how do we automate the rest of it, because it's not just how much can I make on my Bitcoin investment? It's more than that. It's how can I actually use it as a payment, which is what was the original thesis, right? And so we're really looking at that, and that really boils down to, number one, as I said, optimizing financial logistics. So finding out where the inefficiencies are and using technology and automation to streamline those things. Number two, it's meeting the regulators where you find them. Yes, there are things that regulators can and should change, but that change doesn't happen overnight. And if you just find yourself at a standoff with regulators, it's very, very difficult to make progress that way. And the third thing is understanding that there are new paradigms. There are new ways of thinking about how to deal with these instruments and how to deal with the financial markets generally, things that we take for granted. The existence of centralized exchanges, for example. I'll throw a grenade into the room and say, maybe that's not long for this world. So, that's the way that I think we have to approach this.
Terrific. And Jason, you probably have some very, you're living this right now with Stella, right?
Yeah. When I think about, how it's going to change sort of the existing financial players, I think the first and possibly most important point is digital assets are not going to replace, the entire financial system. Like banks aren't going to go away. I think certainly in the early days, and I think there are still some, Bitcoin maximalists or others who sort of see cryptocurrency as a chance to completely do away with the existing system. I don't think that's going to be the case. What we're going to see, and what we are seeing already, is we're seeing existing financial institutions figuring out how they can use things like digital assets to supplement their existing services. So, for example, on Stellar, we have one of the oldest banks in Europe has issued a euro stablecoin, and we view that as a really important piece of our overall philosophy. We think blockchain and digital assets can supplement the financial system instead of completely replacing it. And so, like Patrick was saying, compliance is necessarily a part of that. We need to make sure that all of this is done in a compliant way, because we do have regulations for a reason. None of us want it to be easy for terrorists and other illicit actors to move money around. So you need these things, and it's really what's important is getting regulated financial institutions and also the regulators themselves to really understand how things like blockchain can actually help those, how it could actually be easier to trace the flow of funds and things like that, while still, of course, protecting the privacy of individuals. So I think we're going to see banks start to get more and more into stablecoins, digital assets, and that will both allow them to provide new services, but it can also potentially allow other actors, like, for example, a mobile wallet that wants to really serve a targeted unbanked population. They can now, using those digital assets, they can serve that population. So we're going to see this sort of grow what financial actors can do instead of replace them entirely with something different.
Right. And as it happens, though, and you touch on an important point here, I mean, this is a global technology. It's a global innovation, and you talk about bad actors, right? But you also mentioned a euro stablecoin. There are many people watching this parallel summit right now who are wondering about the United States, though, in particular. Why is it important for the United States to act decisively? What's at stake if we don't? But also for us, the three of us in the private sector, how much does one country's leadership matter here? And how should we think about the global role, or the role of countries and the leadership to make sure that this innovation is broad-based, but it also does help our own economies that we live in?
Well, I'll take a stab at that one. But first, I want to say it's really remarkable. Jason, I loved your comments there, and it's funny because I bet if our colleagues were watching, they would say, "Hey, what happened? They switched Jason and Patrick's brain there because I was talking like SDF and you were talking like security." It's great. That's a good mind meld. And I couldn't agree more. By the way, those were I think that insight is spot on. Rumi, it's a great question, and I think it's really. It's good that we're having this discussion following the panel there with Congressman Soto and Congressman Emmer, because I think they really got to the core of this, and that is that at the end of the day, to say we're technological leaders, my answer, and I'll be honest, my answer is so what? What does that mean? What are you going to do with that, right? And the real question comes down to. Is that going to be, is that technological advantage going to be used for good? I say this a lot. I say you make a hammer, you can use it to build a house, you can use it to bash someone in the head. It's not the technology, it's the policies that underlie the technology. It's the things that you as a society choose to do with the technology. And blockchain in particular, for those who really understand how it works, on the one hand, if you don't attach identity, and here we're talking about all the FATF stuff, if you don't attach identity to it, it's a money launderer's dream. You can send value anywhere you want. Nobody knows where it went, why it got there, or what anyone's going to do with it. On the other hand, if you attach identity to every transaction, then you have the greatest big brother surveillance tool ever invented. And, so in this conversation earlier, and really the backdrop of this entire discussion, which is, one, is blockchain critical American infrastructure? I think easy answer, yes, of course. But two, how do we maintain a technological edge over China? And I think that first and foremost, we need to maintain a philosophical edge. What are we going to do with it? If you are going to deploy blockchain technology universally to surveil your entire population, and in China, no one has an expectation of privacy, and that's not a knock on the entire nation of China. It is a fact, and I don't know. Sure, that's a powerful deployment of technology, but is it a good deployment of technology? And I think if we start there and look at what we want to do with the technology to maintain the values and the principles, which include things like financial inclusion, as Jason was talking about, then we're going to get to a better place. And certainly those of us who are in the industry, I can tell you right now, what we do in the United States of America, the brilliance of the technologists here is unsurpassed. So I'm not worried about that part of it. I'm more worried about what we do next.
Yeah, and building on that, I think we're also at a point where the technology decisions are important. I think focusing on sort of the CBDC conversation, I think a lot of people, and rightly so, wanted to start with the policy implications. Let's set the tech aside. Let's not talk about this network or that network or proof of work, proof of stake. Let's really think about the policy implications. And I think that was right. That's the right way to start. But you do reach a point where the technology will intimately interact with the policy and the outcomes you're going to get. Patrick just outlined some examples of that around identity and the difference between the big brother state and others. And so I do think we're at this point now where everyone needs to be thinking about the actual technology to implement this on. For example, one important variable that's of course close to my heart and SDF's is the question of an open network, an open permissionless network versus a permissioned network. Quite frankly, there are use cases for each, and each one has pros and cons. But we need to think deeply about which one makes sense for things like digital assets. Our view is open permissionless networks should and will play an important role in all of this, because we've seen with the internet, for example, the power of an open network. The whole point of it is you don't know what someone else will be able to do. If it's open, you open yourself to that potential innovation. I think also certainly in some of the in some more developing economies, and for example, we're seeing this in a lot of the island nations, they are very interested in CBDCs because of the financial inclusion potential there. And our view is, if you want an instrument that acts cash-like, it's of course not the same as cash, but cash-like, an open permissionless network is the best technology for that, and quite frankly might be the only technology for that. So that's an example of where the technology choice really is important for the policy outcome you're trying to have. So we think it's important that as the Fed and other central banks are thinking through this, they start to consider the technology more closely, and we think we need this sort of public-private collaboration so that on the private side, we can be understanding what are the things that central banks need, because we don't, nobody thinks that all the blockchains out there, they have the exact feature set that is needed, that they just happen to get it 100% right. It's gonna be this back and forth. It's about iteration. It's about that sort of Silicon Valley software ethos of how you create technology that's really, really useful.
Right. Well, then what do you think though is at stake if the US government and its leaders do not move fast enough? You know, Jason, you mentioned we're kind of at a point now where we can focus on technology, but there's so many who still say this is still so nascent, right? There's time yet. We still need to learn about this. How much more learning do we need to do, or do government leaders need to do versus now acting and participating in public-private partnerships and other ways of progressing here?
Well, one thing I would say, I'm going to kind of skirt around the question. I'm not going to give an answer of like how quickly do we have to act. But I will say, I think one thing that countries can do is they can move forward with more projects involving private stablecoins. You don't have to, a central bank doesn't have to jump straight to, here's a retail CBDC, everyone now has an account with the central bank. You don't have to jump all the way to that right away. There's a broad space of potential things to do, and quite frankly, we at SDF are seeing more and more interest from central banks actually to sort of start with pilot projects, or they want to see the experience of commercial banks within their country issuing stablecoins. So I do think that's a very useful way to start. And of course, increased regulatory clarity would help with all of that. But I think that's a good way to start. And again, we can kind of start iterating, figuring out what works, what doesn't, and make progress that way.
Right. Patrick, do you have other thoughts on ways that governments can become more engaged?
Well, I think governments are becoming engaged, but government engagement is not always a good thing. I think that there's a lot of sometimes when you don't really understand something and you start tinkering around with it, and I think it's not really that, because I'm not really trying to say that every lawmaker is complete or policymaker is completely bumfuzzled by blockchain technology. It's not really that. It's really that what we're saying is that most of the time, if you talk to regulators, if you talk to policymakers, the very first thing they're trying to do is figure out into what bin does this thing fit. I need to classify this thing, right, as animal, vegetable, mineral. What is it, right? And when it's new, it really typically doesn't fit into any one of those categories. And it's that kind of tension between trying to categorize it so that you can regulate it and trying to capture the new potential of it is where we run into some problems. So I think and I'm not saying that it should be a one-way dialogue, because I think that's a problem that our industry has, is that we often think, well, if you guys would just shut up and listen to us, then you'll understand all the magical things we're telling you. And I think that doesn't get anywhere either. So I think that what really needs to happen is, I think first of all, we need to really look at what we want to achieve with particular technologies in terms of philosophical and policy outcomes, just as Jason said. Like, first talk about that, and then you can figure out where it fits. I do want to make one note because, as we came into this part of the discussion and leading in from the last panel, there's this issue of China. And I think that you have two camps. You have one camp that says, look, this is a grave threat to the US dollar and to US, even national security. And then you have another camp that says, no, it's a US dollar is an impregnable fortress. If I had to put myself in one camp, I'd be in the former camp more than the latter camp. It's more nuanced than that, but I would say anyone who doesn't think that this is, real, and that the use of the technology by sovereign actors to influence global affairs is real, I think that they are really, really just whistling past the graveyard. It's real. And so it's incumbent upon us to recognize that and to act upon it. I'm really, really grateful for the work that the Chamber is doing and the blockchain caucus in this regard. So I'll end on that note.
And I would just add to that. I mean, I think in this age of Facebook, we've all become very used to talking about network effects and how powerful they are. We shouldn't be confused. Money is a network effect, and money that can go more viral is more powerful. So I agree with what Patrick just said about the importance of countries like the US and others sort of being part of this progression.
Right. And I also underscore that the United States is made of 50 states, and we're certainly seeing a lot of leadership from Wyoming. There's a bill in Illinois right now. Kentucky had a crypto mining incentive bill. Perry Ann previously was talking about Miami as a city. So leadership is not just at the federal level, and it's great to see a number of US states and municipalities stepping up in this area as well. So with that, I'm going to thank you both, Patrick, Jason, Security, and Stellar Development Foundation for joining me today in this discussion. And for those watching, please enjoy the conference as it continues. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rumi. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks.
Blockchain technology is the most important technological innovation we will see in our lifetimes.
Established in 2014, the Chamber of Digital Commerce is the world's leading trade association representing the blockchain technology industry. Our mission is to promote the acceptance and use of digital assets and blockchain-based technologies.
Want to know about this product, they want to know about this technology, and you will be welcome with open arms in most offices if you take the time to get involved.
Since Bitcoin's inception in 2009, the idea and promise of blockchain technology has seized the imagination of engineers, scientists, and technologists around the world. These nascent and evolving innovations offer immense possibilities for business, government, and consumers. The Chamber champions innovation and works in close partnership with innovators, policy influencers, and government leaders to educate, inform, and advocate for the development and growth of this new technological frontier.
The Chamber of Digital Commerce has been at the forefront of blockchain public policy developments in Washington, D.C. In my opinion, the Chamber is in the best position to represent the many diverging branches of the blockchain ecosystem.
When you join the Chamber of Digital Commerce, you become a member of a thriving community where you will have access to policymakers and industry leaders that are at the vanguard of blockchain technology.
We've come to look to the Chamber to bring real intelligence and clarity to the public discussion of digital assets and blockchain technology, and that intelligence and clarity is so needed.
We invite you to join us at the Chamber of Digital Commerce, the unified voice for the blockchain technology industry.
All right, well, another piece of the puzzle that's important that we get right is the media's role and how blockchain technologies and cryptocurrencies are going to emerge in our public and our private sectors. There's been instances where the media has been great, and then there's been instances where the media has been not so great. A lot of times we see stories and headlines that are driven by controversy or things that are interesting but not necessarily helpful. But of course, the media plays a very important role in educating the public more broadly on things that they need to understand. So what does the media need to do in order to support the growth of this industry in a responsible way? Well, to talk about this more, we'll be bringing in the Chamber's own Chief Marketing Officer, Jackie Price, as well as a number of leading journalists throughout the media industry. Let's go to our next session.
Thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. And thank you, Perry Ann, for that great introduction. As she said, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of the Chamber, and I'm also a former journalist myself. So I'm super excited about our panel today. We've got 4 of the top journalists in the financial industry joining us to talk about how they cover blockchain, digital currencies, and the tremendous innovations that we are witnessing in our industry as things explode, as we've been talking about all morning. So joining us today, let's just jump right into the panel, are Mark DeCambry, who is the markets editor at Dow Jones and MarketWatch, Michael Del Castillo, who is the associate editor at Forbes and is a prolific writer on our industry, And Michael Casey, who is the Chief Content Officer at CoinDesk, recently launched CoinDesk TV. If you haven't checked it out, check that out. We love it. We've all been watching it here. And last but not least, who is not joining us live today is Angie Lau. She's not here because she's sound asleep in Hong Kong, but she very kindly, we asked her if she would please, as the editor and CEO of Forecast News, and as a former Bloomberg Asia anchor, if she would share some of her thoughts to kick us off here on how journalists and the media are covering our industry in Asia. So let's have a listen. If you can roll the tape, we'll take a look at what Angie has to say.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. And I want to thank as well Digital Chamber of Commerce for asking me to join you all for Parallel this month. And while I would have loved to have joined you all live, it is in the middle of the night for us here in Asia. So here's a quick hit in a pre-record instead. So it is great to be here. I'm Angie Lau, Editor-in-Chief of Forecast News, a digital media platform that covers very specifically blockchain, crypto, and digital assets and emerging technologies that shape our world at the intersection of business, politics, and economy from Asia to the world. And it is from this unique perspective that I share an update with you from our vantage point right here in Asia. First, some insights on how blockchain and digital currencies are being covered in the mainstream and business media in this region. So increasingly, I'd like to share that the coverage reflects something we've been monitoring since day one at Forecast. And this is the rise of China and its role in blockchain innovation. Coverage in the mainland, and I'm talking about domestic media, often state-run and state-owned media in China, understandably more exuberant and at the same time conservative in tone, since this is a PBOC government-led initiative. Now contrast that to coverage by foreign media outside the country, outside China, and in this region. And I do note that it's starting to take a more apprehensive tone, asking where's the balance from other nations, notably a recent column by an ex-colleague of mine at Bloomberg, Neil Ferguson, who shared this: "Don't let China mint the money of the future," outlining that, first, a central bank in the modern fiat monetary system can influence money supply. We all know that. But also noting that something that I think has been part of our conversation for a while now, both at the Digital Chamber of Commerce level, at the regulatory level, and the international level, and also what we're covering here, that China has been thinking a lot more creatively than its American or European counterparts. I want to share with you, indeed, that's something that we're reporting on in an upcoming exclusive series that we're working on at Forecast, with the support of a grant from a mainstream institution, Judith Neilson Media Institute in Australia, that has tasked us to report on this story more widely. And so we're going to be reporting on China's increasing influence in blockchain technology and potentially shift geopolitical power dynamics as well. We believe there needs to be a continued push on educating everyone in this space, not only on policy, but also other media and peers. So when it comes to educating the mainstream media, while the majority of headlines does still remain fixed on Bitcoin prices coming up or down or the latest scams, there's also increasingly more thoughtful coverage. It's still not quite as deep as what we're covering from a more blockchain-centric perspective and blockchain niche, including blockchain services network being built out of China. This is still not a widely covered nor even known by mainstream audience, including senior executives and C-suites at multinationals across the Asia Pacific, and we know this anecdotally. While of course we all believe that it's important for the media to understand more about the opportunities in this space beyond Bitcoin prices, it also predominantly depends on editorial vision and direction, really. I was asked to speak on this specifically from the Digital Chamber of Commerce, and on this, I'm going to have to be more critical of the general state of media coverage in blockchain and cryptocurrency. Unless there is real dedication of resources and the desire to have reporters in newsrooms develop this beat more thoughtfully and really take the time to develop and craft a subject matter authority on this, this kind of coverage will rest on those of us who have dedicated our niche focus on this industry. What is good is that our peers actually read us, and from that education and broader narrative can flow and inspire, we hope, reporters to pitch to editors on the rising influence of this industry. So I hope this was helpful. It will take continued communications, working your media connections, and sharing developments as much as possible. You're doing important work. I share it, and I thank you for it. So have a great rest of the session. We hope to be a continued resource to you at forecast.news, and that's www.forecast.news. Until the next time.
So that's a great place to pick up. I'm going to just let Angie give us the lead here and ask each of you guys to really respond to some of what she said, which one of the things that really interested me is she's talking about educating fellow journalists who really are still, in many cases, at the earliest stages of understanding our industry. And interestingly, this is exactly what our congressman spoke about in the first segment, was that they're still trying to do that with their colleagues. So can each of you kind of chime in here a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of your industry and your editors and your reporters, fellow journalists, how they are covering the industry and how they're not covering the industry? I'll start with you, Mark DeCambry.
Thanks for having me, and great to be here with the Michaels. Yeah, it's a fascinating time, right? Because we're really at the doorstep of a new industry and a new way of thinking about money and assets, really. So it's there's been a lot of struggles, I think, I'm sure, inside newsrooms as to how much time and space to allocate to digital currencies and digital assets and crypto and even the nomenclature, right? Should crypto be, capitalized, or should it be singular? So there's all these questions about how to approach the industry, capital Bitcoin or lowercase. But at the end of the day, it seems like a fundamental shift into something that we really need to get a hold of and get our arms around. So it's really sort of a good start to our conversation about kind of where innovation is going to come. And I think one of the things we need to do is kind of shift away from just focusing on prices, the daily moves of Bitcoin, and into what fundamentally is happening beneath the surface. And certainly there's a lot going on. So that's one of the things I think we're trying to focus on more.
I'll chime in there. In response specifically to your comment about education and how our industry is dealing with education, I'm happy to report in one sense that I think we're dealing with it well. One of the nice things about Forbes is that it's very horizontal. We have beats that cover pretty much everything in the world. And since I joined there just about 3 years ago, I've seen an increase in inbound requests from my colleagues across the board. People who write about healthcare asking me about blockchain, people who write about the music industry asking me about blockchain, people who write about all wide variety of aspects in all areas around the world coming to me asking questions about cryptocurrency and blockchain. So to a large degree, I think that education is happening organically as the tendrils of crypto expand out further and further into mainstream, as institutions get involved, as big enterprises get involved. There's a self-education that's happening in our non-crypto peers. But there's another educational aspect where I think deserves a little bit more attention, which is those who are covering it full time. I'll be totally honest, I mean, we're frequently dabblers at the very beginning. I have a degree in English literature, and the closest education I ever got to cryptography was studying metaphysical poetry and how to understand the different layers of meaning. And I had to learn in the trenches from peers, from brilliant colleagues that had been around a lot longer than I did. But to wrap up this comment on education, I think that is formalizing to a degree. And I have to take the opportunity to plug just a little bit here. Myself and peers at Wall Street Journal and CoinDesk and elsewhere are founding a nonprofit called the Association for Cryptocurrency Journalists and Researchers, ACJR, which is specifically aimed at sort of like helping new reporters sort of come up the learning curve faster. So some of the education is happening organically, and it's really cool to see it happening in beats outside of blockchain and crypto. But we still have a lot to teach ourselves, and I think we can do that by leveraging those who've been around longer and those who know other areas.
So I'll add to this. I'll just say I'm the one person that's I mean, Michael's been from a crypto-specific institution, CoinDesk, and now is at a more mainstream, but as he says, it's horizontal structure. I did the opposite move. I was at the Wall Street Journal for many years, and now I'm at CoinDesk, and so that's given me a different perspective. I mean, I felt like, you know, I had Paul Vigna, my co-author, former colleague at the Journal, on my podcast yesterday, and we were reminiscing about the days back in 2013 when the only things that seemed like our editors wanted us to cover was who is Satoshi, and it was just mad because we wanted to write about all these other things. It was like, no, find him. And he says they still kind of are a bit obsessed with that, but of course they are getting more sophisticated in the knowledge and the questions and so forth. On the CoinDesk side, it's actually the opposite. I find that what's happening now, as particularly the Coinbase listing yesterday, where we are deficient, you know, and this is just, you know, our own dirty laundry being aired here, is we need more capability to understand traditional financial markets, to understand, you know, to better read a corporate balance sheet, for example, and sort of grapple with this worlds that are now coming together. So there is actually learning on both sides that needs to happen. And I think what's interesting is there's people like myself and Michael and Mark, who's done a lot of coverage of this, who are straddling these worlds now and bringing them together. I think that's really interesting. I'm going to give an anecdote there, though, or at least a story. And this is not to slam the New York Times, but I need to say it because it's been bugging me since last night. There's still so much learning that has to go. There was a story in the Times, I'm not going to name the journalist, yesterday, talking about the energy problem of Bitcoin. And it had at the very end of it a line that was just absolutely unsustainable. And it said that proof of stake is going to solve this. Ethereum is expected to move to proof of stake, and so is Bitcoin. And it says expected to. There was no attribution to anybody. It was just like the final line in this. And like anybody who understands how Bitcoin works, I mean, I suppose there is a very, very slim possibility that might happen, but there's no way you could write a blanket statement like that, right? So there's still a lot of learning that needs to happen. That obviously got through editors. How people understand how this network works and why that is an almost impossible thing to happen. That is the core problem. They don't actually understand the functionality of a decentralized network, the nature of Bitcoin, and how all the forces in the world are working against that actually happening. And so, you know, there's still a huge learning curve for many journalists to go through.
And to riff on that, Michael, I'd say the fact-checking process is only as good as the fact checkers, right?
Right.
And obviously, the New York Times is, you know, well respected for its fact-checking processes, but if you don't have informed fact checkers, there's only so much that you can do there. I do think that the fact checking as a concept is something that the industry still has a long way to go on. And trade publications and mainstream publications alike would be well served by taking a breath and doing a little bit more fact checking as we go forward. That's just a great case in point.
Yeah, it's a really interesting example, and maybe Mark, you can start to chime in on this too. I know we talked a little bit before our panel today, the three of us, about this obsession with price. And as somebody myself who was a journalist, I understand that there is a migration in the beginning of disruptive technology movements toward the easiest thing to explain. And price is obviously very easy to explain. It goes up, it goes down. And one of the things that we're noticing at the Chamber in our interaction with journalists is that increasingly you have mainstream television journalists and certainly some of the other larger media outlets that are following writers like you guys and reporters like you guys, and also certainly things like CoinDesk. And they're starting to learn more and more, but we are still stuck in this sort of driving narrative of what is today's Bitcoin price? And after yesterday, what is the price of Coinbase going to be today? So how do we kind of get beyond that and expand into a broader narrative? And also, I'm super interested to hear from you guys about what do you see as the future of investigative journalism in our industry?
So yeah, I think we should disabuse ourselves of the notion that we're gonna stop focusing on price. Price is, we're capitalists, right? So that's in the follow the money chase is what journalists do all day long, which is also why folks would have Casey chasing up Satoshi or Satoshis or whomever. But yeah, I don't think that the fascination with the fluctuations around Bitcoin are going to change anytime soon. But I do think we need to expand into what's happening beneath the surface. And like I said at the top of this, kind of the notion of what is blockchain doing and what are the implications, right? A lot is at stake, it seems, because it feels like we're at an inflection point on a lot of different fronts. Part of it driven by this whole notion that we've got super low interest. We're in our second financial crisis, which happens to also be a public health crisis. So we're wrestling with those issues. And really, when you think about Bitcoin, it was born out of the first financial crisis. And so here we are in the second leg of a new one, expecting some point of normalization to happen. And all the while, it should be no surprise to anyone that folks are very fixated on global deficits growing, on inflation fears, and really that's kind of the backdrop to the emergence and certainly institutional adoption of Bitcoin. And that's part of the narrative that we're trying to push as well, because part of it is about Bitcoin and about crypto, but another part of it is about, again, like I said earlier, the evolution of money and these concepts and these thoughts about what it all means. Where will be the capital of money? Is the U.S. losing to some component its hegemony? Is dollar hegemony at stake? So there's just a lot of questions around that, and I think we're going to start to see more reporting around that as well. And just kind of to your point about when will we see more investigative journalism? There's a point at which you'd get like these emails from people, and you'd be like, "Who are these people? Why are they emailing me?" So I think as the industry has matured, you get to know who's real and who to follow, and I think that maturational process will also yield more investigations into Coinbase. Not that there's anything wrong there, but just like what's going on there, what's happening beneath the surface, and other industries too. Just looking at miners more in detail. So I think that's going to happen.
Jackie, I could build on something if you don't mind from what Mark said about we can't avoid the price, but then he talked about this broader macroeconomic stories that come out of it. I think part of the solution here is to be smart about how we weave the narrative between price and all of this, right? I mean, there's a strong argument to make that the first real proven use case of Bitcoin is actually speculation, but that's not a bad thing, because that is how you basically build the network effects. That's how you get all the excitement, the buzz, and then this is this whole waves of innovation theory, and then it ultimately builds, raises everything else, and we get there. So what we're really talking about is an economic system. And I think that's where the deficit of understanding is that people don't see how all these pieces come together. They see a rising price and some speculation. They go, oh, that's a bubble. That's a tulip bubble. But they're not thinking hard about how it all feeds back into this network effect of, the FOMO effect of people now, going after the next Coinbase, and how that's going to flow more money into the crypto space. And that's going to lead to innovation here and there. And so I think it's not about ignoring one or the other. It's thinking hard about, this is truly a uniquely different economic system. And prices and markets are absolutely central, to Mark's point, to that. So how do we get sophisticated about that rather than dismissing things as a bubble or whatever, and trying to understand how this comes together? On the investigative piece, yes, we need this. We need that level of quality journalism to be brought to this. People are doing it, but there's much more to be done. I do feel like this is where the mainstream media has a lot more experience than, say, the CoinDesk of this world, but we are investing in this ourselves right now. We're expanding our long form coverage. We're looking to make sure, we think, for example, that having crypto journalists be very deliberate about focusing on awards. So here's a competition for you guys. Let's get out there and sort of battle over some Loeb awards or something, right? That becomes a structure. The Journal was always very good at this. It's like, okay, we're gonna get a Pulitzer this year, and they put all this energy into doing so, and out of it comes incredible reporting, like John Carreyrou's work on Theranos, right? So having a very deliberate focus on how can we rise to that level with the big guys, right? And be part of the broader conversation. And maybe there are awards to be had in this. I think that helps to feed the positive feedback loop of quality journalism and sort of deep-seated investigation, because it's absolutely needed. There's so much fraud and scammy stuff out there that, there's a key role to play in exposing them for the sake of bringing integrity and trust to the system.
And you can't do any exposing until you actually understand what's happening in the industry, understand the coding process, understand how the protocols work, understand the difference between a proof of work and a proof of stake, and what that means for various and sundry digital assets. That's kind of the key knowledge and growth and maturation needs to happen on that level. And you need to get to there before you can break stories, which is, it's great that, we're building, journalistic clubs and affiliations around that, because that's what's lost.
And I'd chime in there. I think that investigative journalism is kind of like the institutional adoption of the media world. You don't start there. You kind of have to build to that. And picking up on a word that Michael said, we're investing in that. We're investing in investigation. Investigation is expensive. And the journalism business model, when Bitcoin came out, the journalism business model was broken. It was struggling, it was hurting. And then this new beat comes in to an already broken journalism model, and it had to survive. And how did it survive? It survived with the low-hanging fruit, which was price stories. And I think that price stories are still valuable. I think they will always be valuable. They will always be a reflection of more than just the value of that particular asset, but the value of the ideas underneath that asset, which permeate all blockchain, including permissionless blockchain and distributed ledger technologies. But as the journalism business model has slowly, if I'm to be a little optimistic, started to fix itself, and as the media, as the crypto media business model has started to mature, and we're seeing subscription models, and we're seeing television broadcasts, and we're seeing all kinds of other different ways to generate revenue, I think that we will start to see more expensive journalism. And it really is just a matter of connecting that dot from the price story that took 10 minutes to write and gets 1 million clicks versus the investigative journalism piece that took 10 weeks to write and gets 1,000 clicks. We have to connect those dots.
Part of it too, Michael's, tell me if you disagree, is that this was viewed as a niche, a little small area of the market. And if that. Now, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley are looking at, the quarterly results that Coinbase put out. And they're like, whoa, did you see those? Did you see those fees? I want a piece of that. Yeah. So that's the other, that's how adoption happens. That's like, to Michael's point, Casey's point, that's how network effects happen. People want a piece of that. And that's also going to generate more and different types of coverage, because that adoption by some of the traditional players in the industry also feeds into how you cover it and how we think about it and how our editors come back to us about this industry.
And I want to just pop in real quick here. We've got just about a minute left, and we do have a question from somebody in the audience, which is relevant. Do you think we're going to see a 24-hour crypto-focused news channel, or will legacy television just discuss the industry more and more? That is an interesting question for sure.
Well, I think I should answer that, right?
Yeah.
It's called CoinDesk TV. It's not 24/7. That's true. Yes, but we are certainly, it's digital first. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think any TV channel that launches now, out of anywhere, is going to be a traditional cable TV channel or a traditional network TV. It's going to be, over the top digital first stuff. But yeah, it's funny, we call it TV, and it's not actually TV is an outdated word, of course, but we're calling it TV. I don't know if we're running out of time. I just want to make one quick point, though, to what Mark was saying. If it's okay, Jackie, and we're running
sure, yeah.
It was just simply like, he was talking about, this, how do you get people excited, and how does he stopping seeing it as a niche? I go into, we're hiring aggressively, so we're going to all the, the CUNY, the Columbia, and the NYU job fairs and everything else. And I'm often the guy that comes in and says, and I tell them one thing, I say, this is the most exciting story in finance. Nothing like this has happened for 500 years, right? This is a change in the structure of our financial system that began with the Medici at the end of the 15th century. This is so big. So when people get that, then the students are coming at it. We're getting so much inbound because of the fact that people get it. So I love the idea that younger people who are seeing it, whose brains aren't sort of shaped by the sort of the old structure of the past, are able to get enthusiastic about it and see that this is a huge opportunity. It's not a niche at all. This is transformative. And there's a direct line from this to China's digital currency. They are part of the same beat, right? So, it's a really big deal. And I think it's a good point, Mark, that we just got to get away from that because it's a very narrow way of thinking.
And unfortunately, we're out of time. I feel like we could carry on and on. Mark, Michael, Mike, thank you guys so much. We'd love to have you all back on the program again. Before I hand it over to our Chief Policy Officer, who's going to talk about Washington and what is the plan moving forward, please check out our new store. We've got Liberty hats and crypto and Liberty for All t-shirts and all kinds of great things in our new store. It's on our website, so please check it out. And now I'm going to hand it over to Amy Kim, who is our Chief Policy Officer, to talk about what's ahead in Washington. Are we going to get in the game and move forward here? Take it away, Amy. Thanks so much, guys.
Wow, what a great program. We can see from today's speakers, we have some real champions out there. First, Congressman Soto and Emmer fighting every day for regulatory clarity and promoting businesses to develop and create this technology. We covered the innovators in this space and industry pushing the envelope, achieving real, meaningful outcomes. And we also talked about education, not just of policymakers, but of the media. And I would even argue of the public. And what it comes down to is the decisions we make today. How do we support it? How do we want to promote this and help it to grow? What do we want to do with it? Those are the things that drive policy, and those are the things that policy can drive. So we need to focus on this moment. In this moment, we're at the precipice. We're at the precipice of a change in the way we think about money. The ability to transact digitally in a secure manner is an extraordinary leap forward. And at the same time, the rules that policymakers are considering now will have a significant impact on that future. For example, they can fundamentally change our notions of financial privacy when you're looking at what's happening in the anti-money laundering sphere. And some of the existing, I think what we're seeing is that some of the existing and developing systems that employ smart contracts and other mechanisms are going to challenge everyone at every level: policymakers, industry, media, the public, and even in every kind of policy structure. At the tax level, we'll see it at the accounting level, we're seeing it at the securities level, we're seeing it at the anti-money laundering level. And each of these issues are front and center for us in 2021. And I think you heard that pretty clearly on our first panel with the Blockchain Caucus co-chairs. So these are important challenges that we need to come together to address. But we also need to embrace this technology, embrace its complexity and usefulness for compliance, and think creatively how we can address these risks. Because I think it was great the way Patrick described it. It's like putting fine wine into a milk carton. That might work as a mechanism to hold it for the time being, but it's not a long-term solution. So one way that we can look at this is to look at history as an example. Ever since the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009, we have been in a very risk-averse posture, and understandably. But we seem to be continuing the dynamic that no new risk can be introduced into the financial system. And that the only thing that we have allowed for some risk tolerance is cash. And yet, ironically, cash is the medium overwhelmingly used for money laundering and terrorist finance. What's causing so much friction, in my view, is that we're looking at new products and services that are not fully understood, and yet they're quickly developing. The ground is shifting under our feet. And it's that fear of the unknown that's hindering our progress. Just draw from one other lesson from history, which is the internet. In the 1990s, how many of us realized the full power and capacity of the internet, how that would change our lives? I know I didn't at that early stage. And now, similarly, here we're looking at blockchain technology, and it's hard to see for some out there, the potential of blockchain, the potential for digital assets, and its impact on the way that we look at money. This technology has the power to be as transformative, if not more so, than the internet. Few had the vision to see the future of the internet, and our challenge is to enable policymakers to have the vision to see the future of blockchain technology. There's a core group, many of them are our members, that do have this vision and are very concerned about the current trend to regulate first before identifying and exploring the corresponding benefits. That's why we at the Chamber have made it our priority to focus on this important policy area. From a practical perspective, those challenges exist in our industry in the security space, in taxation, in accounting, in anti-money laundering. That's what I spend all of my time thinking about, and what we do at the Chamber to help members of Congress, the media, and others to understand the benefits of this technology, the benefits of engaging with it, the benefits of peer-to-peer transactions, and so much more. Bottom line, as we've heard today, this is no longer an obscure crypto issue, if it ever was. This is now about national security, economic progress, the balance of power, and we need to do something about it now. If you'd like more information on these topics, please visit our website. We have a lot of resources for you there. In the meantime, please join us at our next event on June 17th, the Institutional Case for Digital Assets. It's a fantastic program. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.